Hey everybody, it's Ryan. Let's go over the verses for going on a bear hunt. It looks like this. We're going on a bear hunt. I've got my binoculars. I'm not scared. I'm not scared. Ooh, look at that tall, wavy grass. So a lot of great benefits to this. We are doing actually a country strum pattern. We're going to be playing a bass line outlining chords, and we're going to be learning how to play octave chords as the bass line, and then another descending bass line. So lots of really cool things happening in just this verse alone. Let's take a look at the country strum pattern. So it's kind of like as though you were playing the root, and then what I do is I strum, and then I put this part of my hand on the strings to mute it. So just try that with me. And. If that A string rings out, that's okay. And we're just on an E minor chord, as you can see. One more time. So now we're going to do the same thing, except this time we're going to be a little bit more particular with the bass note, because now what we want is we want to play the A string here. So let's try this very slowly like this. Go ahead and join me. And if you're not getting it right away, that's okay. It just takes practice. Even if you try to get it, if you get it like some percentage of the time, that'll be great. So we just repeat that over and over again until we get to this part. So once we get to here, so let me show you that. We're basically outlining a C chord and a B7 chord, but what we're doing is we're playing them as bass lines. So to do this, instead of playing your C chord the typical way like this, what you're going to do is take your middle finger from the E minor chord, move it over to the 3rd fret of the A string right here. And it's just the finger that's closer to this note right here. And it also can set you up really nicely for your B7. But we are going to play the middle finger on the 3rd fret of the A string, and we're going to be on kind of the tip, kind of the pad, so that way we can use the tip of the finger to mute the low E string, and we're also using the flesh under this finger to mute the D string right here. When we play this part, we don't want to go across all 6 strings, although you could. We kind of want to be a little bit more like just playing the bass notes and being more intentional about what string our strumming hand is playing. So we're going to play the 3rd fret, and then you're going to lift off the middle finger and put down the 1st finger on the 2nd fret of the D string. This is so that way you can have a little bit more separation between the notes rather than them kind of doing that, but honestly that way is fine too. But it makes the bass notes stand out a little bit more. So let's just practice these 2 beats right here like this. And we're just going back and forth. Go ahead and join me. You can see that I'm still keeping the same shape that my fingers are in right now. The pointer finger is also not on the very tip, it's also kind of more so on the pad. So that way we can mute the strings that are around that note. Now let's take this part and put it together so it looks like this. So you're doing a B7 chord, but you're really only trying to play these 2 strings here. And these strings are muted by your first finger. So you can get that very nice and crunchy B7 sound. So let's try it. Here we go. Again. Again. And just keep looping it over and over again. One more time. And then what you're going to do is take your first finger from here, move it to the 2nd fret on the low E string, so that way we can start our octave chords. Octave chords are basically notes that just have the octave above them and no other notes. And they're really useful for beefing up your melody lines or doing things where you can have droning strings. So they're useful for stuff like that. But in this case, we're doing it as a bass line, which is also very common for bass players to do, is to not just play the root note the whole time, but they'll play notes within the triad. So we have the 2nd fret low E. Then you can do either your ring finger or your pinky finger to make the octave. And what I do is as soon as I grab that 4th fret on the D string, you can see that my hand comes up, so that way it can do what we did in the previous video, where all these fingers are muting the other strings that are around it. I'm still wanting to be somewhat articulate, but I'm also not afraid to hit the other strings because I know that this hand is doing the job of muting those strings. So let's just practice this back and forth like this. Here we go. I also don't mind shifting if I'm using my ring finger a little bit. With the pinky, you don't really have to shift if your thumb hangs out up here like I do. One more time. And now what we're going to do is take the exact same pattern, but we're moving it up a string. Sorry. The only difference now is that we have to mute the low E string, which is above this bass note, rather than when we were here, we didn't have any strings that were above this part. So the way that I mute that is typically my middle finger will lightly touch this low E string, and I'm also more so on the pad of this finger, so I'm lightly touching it. And for simplicity's sake, I'll use the same finger. So go ahead and join me. One more time. And then we have the very last bass line. So we're going to play. And there's a couple different ways to play this part as well. What I find to be really useful is knowing how to be able to play open strings while muting all the other ones. So I would highly recommend that if you're able to, try to wrap your thumb around and mute the low E string while your first finger rests across the other strings like this. So just try this with me. If this doesn't work, then you can use either your ring finger or your pinky finger to play the same note as you did in the previous video. So we have, and let's just practice that together. Here we go. So we're practicing having that thumb come up to mute the low E string, or we're practicing switching to that 5th fret on the low E string. Last time. And now we have our 3rd fret on the low E string, which I play with my middle finger, and that first finger again is laying across the strings to mute them. I'm not going across all the strings, but it is nice knowing that is there. And then I use my first finger to play the 2nd fret on on the low E string. So we have, and then I go back to the strum pattern. So this was the verses for Going on a Bear Hunt, and I'll see you in the practice video.